Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast, brought to you by Violet Defense. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and experience you need. Thanks again to Violet Defense for sponsoring the Educational AD Podcast. The Educational AD also wants to thank varsity brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands. Elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. The Educational AD also wants to thank Hometown Ticketing. Hometown Ticketing helps thousands of schools across the country seamlessly provide convenient digital ticketing options for their communities, families, and fans. Finally, the Educational AD wants to thank Ephesus Lighting, Vital Signs, Gipper, Camp Mobile, and Booster Digital Displays. Thanks to all of the great sponsors. Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're back to North Carolina today, and we're visiting with Dena Floyd. Dena is a certified athletic administrator, and she's the director of athletics at Woods Charter School in Chapel Hill. Dena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Jake.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you on. Excited to hear what's happening in your part of the state. Well, you and I were talking before we just came on. It's summertime, but it's a busy time. For our listeners, we're recording this on July 28th. So we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and maybe how your love of sports led you to this career in athletics.
Awesome. Yeah. So I grew up in Midlothian, Virginia, which is right outside of Richmond, Virginia. And I started playing sports at an early age. A soccer park was right behind our neighborhood. So that's what I first started. And that's kind of what I ended up doing through college and post-college. I went to the University of Florida and graduated from there, played soccer there. And then from there, I ended up I didn't really know what I wanted to do after college. I graduated. And so I got into grad school at Florida and ended up saying, all right, I need a job. And my strength coach was like, all right, come work for us. It's a paid internship. So I was all about getting paid. And I got to still work with a lot of the athletes, and I ended up loving it. So I went through a year internship there, got my certifications, and was lucky enough to be able to work at Stanford University a year out of college. So I went on to California in 2005 and had 7 sports. So it was a little different than Florida. My strength coach at Florida, Karen Worth, she had, I think, 3 sports at the time. So when I went into at Stanford, I was a little bit overwhelmed, but needless to say, I learned a ton within that 4-year time period that I was there from 2005 to 2009. And obviously I learned a lot about the strength and conditioning field, but I think what helped me do really well or get into the field, I guess, as an athletic director was learning the different personalities of the different coaches that I was dealing with. Again, so I had 7 teams and I was dealing with at least 7 different personalities or more, with the assistant coaches at an elite institution. So I learned a lot from them and obviously the athletes as well there. So then from there, I came back East Coast. I didn't really have a lot of family out in California. I grew up in Virginia, and my parents are from the East Coast. So I wanted to make it back eventually. So I had the opportunity to coach at NC State. My coach from college got the head coaching job in 2009 at NC State. So I came back and started working with him as an assistant coach in soccer, and then really still helped out kind of in the strength conditioning field there for the first year or two. And was a part of that program for about 4 years. And anyone that knows anything about ACC soccer, it was a challenge, right? It's one of the best conferences in the country. So learned a lot there. Love the Triangle area, still live here. But then got out of coaching about 2012. My coach moved on. And so from there, I guess I could have gone and continued to coach at the collegiate level, but I was in my 30s, early 30s, and I kind of looked at it like, I really don't want to be an assistant coach or aspire to be a head coach collegiately. I had been playing soccer since I was 4, and it was just a lot. It was a lot outside of just coaching the X's and O's. It was a lot of recruiting, a lot that I wasn't really passionate about. So I finished up, I was doing grad school there. I took advantage of them paying for part of your schooling. So I went ahead and started grad school at State and finished up. And that's when I got the job at Woods. So probably 2014 was a couple of years after I stopped coaching at NC State.
I just always love to hear the stories of how we got to where we are now. And I'd read a little bit of your bio, and I saw that you were University of Florida. One of my, I guess I could call it a mentor from a leadership standpoint. I always admired, Becky Burley and
Mhm.
some of the things that she's done. For our listeners, if you don't know Becky Burley, legendary head coach, women's soccer for University of Florida. Can you give us a quick Coach Burley story? Can you share one?
Yes. Becky, first and foremost, is an amazing person, and I actually get to see her this Saturday. So she actually just retired
Mhm.
from UF this past spring, but she also just got this awesome opportunity where the Orlando Pride coach just left. And so they asked her to come on board. So currently she's the interim coach of Orlando Pride. So I'll get to see her this weekend when they play the Courage, which is right down the street from me. But yeah, Becky is just an amazing person. I can't say enough about her. I've stayed connected with her throughout my years past soccer. So I'm about 20 years out of playing, and she just takes care of her players. She's the type of person that stays connected and really wants to know about you as a person. My mother just passed away most recently. So she was telling me how much she admired my parents and how much, you know, she really enjoyed them as people. And so that really meant a lot to me. And I know that doesn't happen at every program, speaking to some of my friends that played at a high level as well. She's helped me even in the job field and helped me navigate that as well, post college. So I can't say enough about Becky and what she's done for me and for a lot of other people as well.
Oh, it's glad to hear you say that. And again, for our listeners, I'll throw out one of my favorite Becky Burley nuggets. Go to YouTube and type in Becky Burley, the green dot, and
Yes.
quick little video. I actually heard that story probably 30 years earlier from another coach at a coaching clinic. He called it the gold dot, but it was the same idea. Just a great, great lesson for coaches and ADs. Let's go and stay on the topic of mentoring. We always like to hear about those individuals that, helped us along, had an influence. The expression I like to use is, I still hear those voices in my head if I'm talking to a coach or a kid or sometimes a parent. So whose voice do you still hear?
So to be honest, my parents were a big influence in my life. They supported me through all of my sports. I played basketball too up until high school. And for me, the one incident, and this might scare some people, that stuck out to me was my dad. So I was playing club soccer, and we were playing this team, and we were down 2-0. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, but at the age where it was starting to get pretty serious. And my parents were putting a significant amount of money into club soccer. And I remember someone got hurt on the field, and I was just kind of standing there. Everyone was standing there waiting. And my dad told me to come here. He was on the sideline. And for whatever reason, my mother wasn't at the game. And they both were usually at the games. And he told me to come here. And I was like, you want me to come off the field? So he whispered into my ear, and sternly, he said, if you don't give effort, we're gonna leave right now. And I wasn't giving effort. I was just acting like I didn't want to be there. Pretty much our team was doing the same thing. So after that, I was slide tackling on the field. I was running hard, doing all these things. I think partly because I was scared, but I gave effort for the rest of that half, and the game was over. We lost. And then I just remember him saying after the game, he was upset. He said, I don't care if you miss every pass. I don't care if you aren't great skill wise, but if you don't give effort, we don't need to be out here. I don't need to be paying this money for you to play and not care, basically is what he said. So after that, it was like a light bulb clicked, because I was talented, but I didn't necessarily put in the effort all the time. And I can honestly say, at least for me, I'm a competitive person, but that's one thing that I hold on to. You have to give effort. Doesn't matter your talent, but you have to give effort.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things that we have total control over, how much
Right.
effort that we choose to give. I'm going to go off script here just a minute, since you brought it up, but as athletic directors, in, what we would call the educational based system,
Mhm.
I think purposely, we differentiate ourselves from club sports, travel sports, AAU. And it's not a right, wrong, good or bad. It's just, we acknowledge that they're different. So from someone who came up through and was, involved with, club sports, how do you manage as an athletic director at your school? How do you manage those challenges that can sometimes occur where there's a tug of war between, club coach, club program, school program? How do you navigate that? I mean, it can be a minefield. What's something a technique you might be able to share with other ADs?
So I think it's important not to subscribe to black and white rules and say, okay, if you don't come to all of the practices and you're going to club practice, then you can't play on our team. I think that's unrealistic, especially in sports like soccer. You can even say lacrosse, or someone that's a dual athlete, a multi-sport athlete, and they're good at one sport, but they also might be good at another sport for your school. So I think it's important that you establish guidelines, communicate with those athletes, and say, hey, I understand that, you're really, really good at basketball and you're going to be at AAU, but we need you on our team and we understand the value of having you on our team so we can work with you. So this is what I need from you. I need to know what practices, here's the schedule. Most of the time you have the schedule well ahead of time. What things can you make? What if you're unable to make it, I need to know ahead of time. It's not something that I want to know hours before, or, you know, uh, something where you're not showing up at all. I
Right.
need the communication to be high. And I think if you approach it that way, I mean, obviously it's a little bit more to manage, but I think it's it's also a great thing in the sense that you're showing that, hey, you're giving value to our team. We appreciate multi-sport athletes. We think it's a great thing that people are able to participate in more than one sport. I mean, research shows that athletes are better, I think, when they
Yep.
participate in more than one sport, mentally and physically. And we're going to support you the best way we can, but you have to help us out on your end by communicating. So I think that's how we approach it at our school. We have athletes that are great soccer players in the Chapel Hill area, Durham area. So they might miss some competitions for cross country, for club soccer, but they're able to compete in some and help the team out. So that's just an example.
No, I love, that you hit on it's communication, both ways by all parties. You got to communicate, and the same thing you mentioned, we don't like surprises. You've got that schedule, you can plan ahead. Good stuff. Dena, you're a certified athletic administrator, and we get a lot of young ADs that listen to our program, certainly
Mhm.
younger than me. And I think it's important to talk about the journeys that we go through to achieve that certification. So, talk a little bit about how you first got involved, let's say with your state association, and then leading up to earning your CAA. How did that all happen?
So when I first started as an athletic director in 2014, I didn't have really any experience outside of, being in the sports world as an athlete and coach collegiately. So for me, I was like, I need to learn as much as I can because I really don't know much. I luckily fell into a conference that people were really, really helpful, but I do remember my predecessor, she was saying, hey, you need to get involved in the NCAA. So that's our state association. She's like, you're going to want to go to the state conference in March. You're going to want to get involved as quickly as you can. And I did that. So I got hired in August and started going to those state conferences in March and started my LCI courses early. So I learned a lot off that, and it was important because there was so much I was like, I didn't even know this existed, right? When you're an athlete,
Right.
when I was a high school athlete, I didn't think about any of how the operational side of things happened. I just knew my AD as the guy that, did our schedule and showed up to some of our competitions. I didn't really know how much it really took to be an athletic director. And I don't think a lot of people still know. I don't, even
Right.
though I think we have a great administration, I don't think everyone really knows what an athletic director does on a daily basis. So, so I did that and I ended up taking the test for my CAA in 2017. So that was really 2.5 to 3 years after I started. And I'm continuing to take courses. I think my goal now is to get my CMAA and to do some instructional courses, either in state or nationally. I've been to one national conference. I'm going to try to go to the national conference this year. As we all know, everything was put on hold last year.
Right.
So I'm always trying to learn, and not just within the NIAAA. I'm looking for other avenues. So I'm a part of the Women's High School Association, and those different types of avenues like leader kit, things that I can learn as much as I can from different people. So a lot of it is also, networking too, and learning
Oh,
different practices from other athletic directors.
yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm also glad, as someone who was on the certification committee for NIAAA for many, many years, glad to hear that you're pursuing that CMAA. If you have any questions about that, shoot me an email. I help a lot of people, put those together. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
We are visiting with Dena Floyd, CAA and athletic director in North Carolina. We're going to come back, but right now we're going to take a quick break and hear from our podcast sponsor, Violet Defense. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Thanks again to Violet Defense for sponsoring the Educational AD podcast. Welcome back to our interview with Dena Floyd, Certified Athletic Administrator and Athletic Director at Woods Charter School in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Dena, one of the things we like to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What are a couple of initiatives or programs that you run at your school that when you look at, you can say with equal parts pride and humility, boy, we do this better than anybody else. What are some best practices that you can share with us?
I know one thing that I started back in 2017 was a leadership group for our athletes. So you can do it however you want, but for us, we pick 10 through 12. So we don't start with ninth graders just because they're getting used to ninth grade. But 10 through 12, we pick about a couple athletes from each grade and meet with them once a month and talk about different leadership topics, basically, or anything that they really. I leave it up to them for the most part. What do you really want to tackle this month? Um, so we meet, we discuss, we do different things for the community. So we're able to do different things. Well, maybe we're supporting the women's basketball team tonight, or maybe we're supporting the track team in the spring. Or how can we get better at specific things as a K through 12 school? How can we incorporate the middle school athletic program, and how can we make it better as people trickle into varsity athletics by their senior year? So I really talk to them because the athletes are such a big piece, and I think sometimes we miss that. We're constantly trying to tell our student athletes what to do and not really asking them more questions, which will kind of help us more navigate what we need to do as an athletic program.
Yeah, it's so great to see the growth of student leadership programs, across the country. We started one at my previous school. We called it a captain's council. But you're absolutely right. Getting their input, getting their ideas, getting their buy-in and ownership
Right.
really can make that program go well. Has there been something in your leadership program that let's say just really sticks out that you're really proud of an idea that the students came up with and then implemented that idea?
Yeah. So about a couple years ago, we had an idea to really support our teams on homecoming. So we don't have football, right? But we're not a huge school. Our school's 515 kids, K through 12. So high school is about 180 kids. So we came up with how can we really celebrate our school, and it was our 20th year anniversary as well, and really celebrate on this night. So they put the buy-in. They made sure that certain or as many alumni came back as possible, and I just remember it just being a really good night. It was the most fun I've had at an athletic event since I'd been on Woods campus. So it was really good because it wasn't just, the coaches, the parents, and everyone putting in the effort, but it was really a full effort from the student athletes as well.
All right, very cool. Okay, that sounds like it could be a CMAA project right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Dina, we've been doing these podcasts now for a little over a year and really enjoyed it. One of the questions that I've been asking athletic directors from across the country revolves around this idea of social awareness, even social justice. And, this is my question. How can we, as athletic administrators, how can we do a better job with our kids, our community, of being socially aware? You have any advice for us?
Yeah, I think honestly, as an athletic director, it's very important because you're seen as a leader, right? People look up to you. Even if you don't realize it, have eyes on you every day and your moves and what you do and what you say and your actions. So that's important. I think number one, it comes from the school, so it trickle downs from the leadership of the school. Um, so if I'm saying one thing and my leadership in my school is saying another, that's going to be combative. So I hope that you align with the mission of your school as an athletic director. I know I do, and I know our school puts a lot of emphasis in social awareness and social justice, and anything with regards to equality, diversity. We place a lot of value in that, and something that we constantly want to get better at. So how do you get better? So for athletics, if you're taking a theme from your school, like letting your coaches know, whoever you hire, know that that's important to you, right? So not just hiring someone because they're really good at paper with the X's and O's, but hiring someone because they actually care about the student athletes and care about people, right? So I know I can say that wasn't always the case for us when I started at Woods. I couldn't always say that because I didn't hire all the coaches,
Right.
that obviously when I first started. So it took a few years for me to say, okay, the coaches that we have now are all really good people and all have the total student athlete in mind, and them as people first before them just being a student, or just being a student and just an athlete. So having their personal well-being in mind first. So I think that's the most important. If you don't have that in place, that structure in place, your leadership, obviously, and then practicing as an athletic director, and then you're trying as an AD, you're the leader for the coaches. You're trying to help them out as much as possible, to lead in the best way that they can, but hiring those good people, then it's going to be hard. And then when you're finding the tools, just like you are with anything else, you have your book, The Athletic Director's Toolbox. Like, it's all about finding the best things for your program. Like, my program is going to be completely different as a K through 12 school than a traditional school in Chapel Hill that has 2,000 kids, 9 through 12. We're going to operate differently, but we can both do great things. But it's just matters of how do you implement those things in your program.
Yeah, really appreciate you really hit those three components on the head: the school culture, the leadership, the athletic director themselves, but then also the coaches, being able to put those people that have that philosophy. Great stuff. And thanks for the shout out on the book too. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, you and I, we've had a chance to get to know each other just a tiny bit, emails and things like that. But this has been really cool, hearing about your school and hearing about your career. But we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. And right now, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Dena Floyd's athletic director toolbox?
I think number one would be, you have to be organized. Whatever that looks like for you, have a system in place. So for me, I have my personal calendar, that I'm putting everything in my life on, either all the things and dates that I need to be at, including my personal life as well. And then obviously having some type of structure for your athletic program, be it, Google Calendar. I know I have a weekly digest for myself and my assistant ADs. So we plan out the week, the things that are coming up, the things that are important, things that we need to specifically do, dates that we're covering, events that we're covering. So it's all in place rather than sending out a million emails within a week. We all know on Friday, the week before, this is what's happening. And this is how it should be structured within that time. So being organized, if you're not, you'll lose your mind, or you'll forget something, which might be worse. You might forget to book refs or something. That's not good. I would say number 2, I wrote this down. Building relationships. Don't just be a transactional athletic director, which I'm not going to call anyone out, but I work with a lot of athletic directors and I feel like they're just transactional. That's it. They don't show up They're not personable. They're just there to give the refs their checks, be at the event, and that's it. I think I love this job because I love building relationships with my coaches, with my athletes. I love meeting new people at events. So be there and build relationships, communicate, and you're going to get so much more out of people. And your program is going to be so much more. Is going to be better for it. You're just going to get a lot of. You're gonna get people to say a lot of positive things about your program if you're more of a transformational leader. Um, and I would say lastly, I would say balance, 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 balance. So I'm a single mom. I have a great village around me. I've lived here for 11 years, so my friends run deep. My parents are only 2.5 hours away in Midlothian, Virginia, and my siblings aren't too far either. So for me, it's important. One of the reasons why I didn't want to get into college coaching is because I saw, especially at the higher level, how much time it took out from your family for some coaches. So I understand that as an athletic director, it is a grind, and on some days you're going to be there 12 hours a day, but you also have to allow time for your family and things that you like to do, or you will burn out, right? I have a 6-year-old son that has energy for days, and he's starting to get involved in sports. So I love hanging out with him. I love hanging out with my friends, etc. So it's important for me to structure that time. Maybe if I don't have a time within a week where we have 4 or 5 competitions, maybe the next week we have more away games, I find that time. Or I work out that structure with my administration. Maybe if I'm staying at the school until 10 o'clock, I teach 2 classes, but my classes don't start till 10. Maybe I come in a little later. Maybe I don't show up at 8 o'clock and I show up at 9, just to give myself that extra hour of sleep. So you have to be strategic about how you do that. I mean, obviously don't take advantage of anything, but be mindful of your mental health, be mindful of the balance of your life and the other things that you do.
Great ideas. I'm so glad you mentioned balance. We talk about balance, with our students all the time, between academics and sports, but, a lot of times we forget that balance applies to ourselves too. So great stuff.
Thank you.
Dena, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and pick your brain, and I encourage you to do so, what's the best way that they could get in touch with you?
So you can email me, dfloyd@woodscharter.org. And if you don't remember that, or if you feel like you're going to spell that wrong, you can just go to the Woods Charter school page, and my information's on that page as well. My Instagram handle is dfloydpt. It's private, but if you message me or friend me, I'll reach back out, and also on LinkedIn and such. So any of those ways, I love talking to other athletic directors. I'm on different Facebook groups and different things like that. And I love sharing information all the time, or receiving information from other ADs, because rarely are you reinventing the wheel, right? A lot of times you're getting that information from other athletic directors and other schools and making it or curating it for your athletic program.
Oh no, absolutely. The Facebook groups, such as High School Athletic Director, the more you, or the less you have to invent yourself, the more efficient you're going to be. And there's just so many great ideas out there that have been proven by ADs. Don't feel like you have to invent something. Steal somebody else's idea and just make it your own. And ADs love that. They say, "Hey, I do that same thing." So great
That's
stuff.
right.
Dena, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Continued success there at Woods Charter. And we are going to see you in Denver this year, right?
Yes, I will be there for sure. I'm already thinking about it and trying to figure out the dates and with athletics and making sure I'm ready to go.
That's one thing that I learned many years ago. I don't schedule any home games
You're right.
during that period in December. So we can travel, but we're not going to have any events on our campus. Okay. Dena, thanks so much for being on. For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these interviews are being uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD.